When I hear someone say the words first person platforming, my expectations usually drop pretty low. I can already see the floaty movement and the controls, which are either way too tight or way too loose for the challenge that the game is presenting me with. Luckily, I don't have to worry about any of that when playing a masterpiece developed by Valve and released as part of the Orange Box, Portal, and later Portal 2. Now I am sure these are games that you are all very well acquainted with, but for those 5 of you who are not, let me sum it up for you. You are in a possession of a portal gun, which can shoot 2 portals onto walls around you. You enter through one of the portals and exit through the other. Now using this gun, you progress through a set of increasingly more difficult test chambers until you finally exit the facility and eat your cake. But have you ever stopped and wondered while traversing these test chambers how they actually came to crafting them? How can you create that type of difficulty without making the test chamber impossible, but still have it be challenging? How do you just start with an empty room and end up with something like that? Well, today I'm going to look at exactly how Portal creates its challenge. Now we need to start basic, and when I say basic, we need to start with definitions of challenge. This might seem really simple to you. Generally speaking, challenge is learning, and on the surface, this is very cut and dry. The problem, however, comes when you try to define individual types of challenge. I, for example, can tell you that Dance Dance Revolution and Dark Souls 3 are both very challenging games, and yet they are challenging in completely different ways, right? I mean, both require you to have good timing, and both require you to have some form of spatial awareness. So wait, does that mean they're challenging in the same way? That doesn't seem right. Well, luckily, we don't have to do the work here ourselves. Some very smart people have already done it. One of my favorite definitions of challenge would be by a educational theorist, Howard Gardner, in his study Frames of Mind, where he pretty much defines 7 distinct styles of challenge/learning. Luckily, for the sake of Portal, we don't actually have to go through all of them. 2 will in fact be enough. I will be taking a look at Spatial and Bodily Kinesthetic. Spatial is exactly what it sounds. It tests your ability to understand and judge space that is around you in a game or in the environment. When you think of a portal map, it is quite obvious why you need to have this skill, or why you need to learn this in order to progress through the game. In every test chamber, you must analyze your surroundings, understand the verticality, the distances, and be able to judge how you are going to get through the test chamber. You need to think a couple of steps ahead, be able to predict advanced movements such as gravity. Now, bodily kinesthetic is a little bit different. It will mostly revolve around your body moving. Well, luckily, playing computer games does not really require that much movement. However, this part also has a lot to do with timing, and I'm sure if you've played Portal, you know why we are including bodily kinesthetic as a type of challenge. You need to be able to judge the time when objects fall, when objects move and you move through space, as well as be able to judge your speed in that space in order to complete the individual test chambers. But alright, we have defined the types of challenge. We know what we want our level to evoke in players. Now we actually need to know how to build a level. So how do they do it? How does Portal create its levels? Well, as with any level that you're designing, no matter if it's a test chamber in Portal or a team deathmatch multiplayer map for Call of Duty, you need to start by having a general idea or a concept. Now, this does not necessarily need to be anything specific, but you should at least have an idea if you want your map to be very vertical, if you want your map to be very long, and if so, how long, and what type of challenges you want to include in this map. If we're talking Portal, do you want to have cubes? Do you want to have moving platforms? Do you want to have acid? What type of player is your map going to be directed at? Are we talking beginner, intermediate? Are you designing for the co-op mod? Or are you doing something experimental and completely different? These are all things you should address before starting to build a map, and these are all things designers of games like Portal need to have documented before they start the work. But let's say you've done it. You have your concept nailed. You know exactly what type of map you want to create. So how do you start? Now, for the sake of our analysis, we're going to look at this picture on the screen right now. And before you go and say that this is far too easy for what we're talking about here, try to remember that what I'm telling you here is not a tutorial on how to craft a difficult map. It is a general set of rules and guidelines that you need to apply, or probably should apply to some extent, when designing any sort of map or challenge. So the difficulty of our example really doesn't matter. Now, in order to design this room, the easiest place to start would be with how many challenges do you want? Well, in this one, we get one. We have this pit that you can't simply get into and then jump out of, but you need to use your portal gun to get through it. And yes, you are right, this is a test chamber that takes place in the beginning of the game, so technically speaking you don't have access to both portals yet, but we're going to skip past that for now. Let's just pretend this is a regular test chamber somewhere further in the map where you can do everything that you can normally do. So you have your room, and you have divided it into 3 parts. The first part where you start, the challenge part, and the part afterwards, which would be in this case, the elevator. Now we need to divide it vertically. How many vertical levels do you want? Well, in this scenario, we're only dealing with 2. The ones in the front and in the back, and then the bottom of our pit. Now at this point, when crafting a level, you would most likely get your pen or pencil and a piece of paper and start sketching out ideas. I've said the same thing when talking about Team Fortress 2 levels, but it is incredibly rare for the first iteration of a level to be fantastic. When we're talking about crafting any map in general, it will most likely take you multiple tries before you can get it to feel right. And the best place to start is by sketching them out. All that's left is to actually go into the editor, build them, test them, see how they feel, and start over again. Always keeping in mind what type of challenge you want to evoke in the player. This would also be a good time to talk about something incredibly important when we talk about level design. Something called magical moments. Now, despite the name, the player is not going to be performing any kind of magic in this scenario. It's actually going to be the designer or the one building the level. See, magic moments are part of the level which evoke that beautiful, fulfilling, and nice feeling inside of your player. One of my favorite examples for something like this would be a jump in a platformer, which is exactly measured so that when you jump, you can fully hold the direction key and land right on the edge, giving you that nice, fulfilling feeling of a long jump that you cleared exactly and specifically. It is incredibly simple by concept, and yet if applied correctly, can make any map feel fantastic, leaving the player smiling after completing it. Now, there is no exact science when it comes to magical moments. My example was very much movement oriented, but they are by no means limited to that. Good story points, complex but satisfying puzzles, a new weapon type in Call of Duty, all of those things can be sort of a magical moment for themselves. It is only up to designers to figure out which ones they want to include in their levels, and whether it fits the theme as well as the challenge you're trying to evoke. Now, my general advice, if you're ever doing this yourself, would be to maybe start at the game metrics, run around the game, see what feels good, and note it down in numbers. It's that easy. See how far you can jump and it still feels comfortable. See how high you can jump so that it still feels comfortable. And once you have a lot of these metrics, see what you can do with them. They can come in and be just as easy as jump into a portal, get shot out right across the room, and land at the door. So, let's recap. What does Portal do to create its challenge? Well, firstly, it understands the type of challenge it wants to evoke in the player. In this situation, being spatial and bodily kinesthetic. Secondly, before they build any chamber, they start at the drawing board, dividing the levels into individual challenges and by verticality to get the feel for what this test chamber is going to end up being like in the end. And thirdly, they focus on creating magical moments, times and aspects of that map which feel fantastic to accomplish by the player and will leave them smiling, feeling satisfied and wanting more once they enter that elevator in the end. And that is it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look into how Portal crafts its maps and by extension challenge. Now, I specifically avoided going really into depth of how you would, box by box craft a map like this, because in the end there is no real tutorial which can teach you that step by step. A lot of it comes down to what do you want the map to be, how advanced type of a player you want it to be for, and also you just giving it that own personal spin. Am I saying that these things apply to all test chambers in Portal? Yes, I actually am. If you're interested in learning more about this by yourselves, it might be a very interesting idea to hop into Portal or Portal 2 and see if you can spot any of the things I've been talking about. That is all from me. I wish you all a beautiful rest of today, and I'm going to see you all in the next video I make. Bye bye.